Okay, now we're going to have the hearing discussion on the HSPD development. And again, we haven't seen the changes on this one, so you're in the same boat that we are. And we will, I guess what we'll do is track them through.
You want me to read all of them?
Yeah, no, please do not. I learned how to read a while ago.
My goodness.
Al, if you'd like,
yeah, why don't we hit the comments that were made last week and the modifications that came out of it.
Exactly.
That would be terrific.
Yeah, okay. So everyone has the track changes that was on the table. So on the front page, in fact, I don't think we did show all the deletions. We were asked to take out
all the deletions are shown as well. Everything's in track change and red line.
Yeah. So all right, if you look on page 2 of 10, at the top, you'll see language that was deleted. We were asked to take out the language that called for the Historical Commission to make a finding historically significant. And I think Steve was pointed out, well, but we'll still need to have criteria for determining historical significance. So now going back to page 1, in that section 2, in order to qualify as an HSPD, the property must involve at least one principal structure that meets all of the following qualifying criteria. And then A, have been constructed prior to 1945. So of course that's all existing language, we haven't changed. So B is new, and what we've done here is we've imported the criteria of significant building from the demolition delay bylaw. So we took out that language on the second page and just put in these criteria here that instead of just referring to the demolition delay bylaw, we brought them in here to page 1. And these would have been the criteria that would have applied. And 4 is a little different in that if you look at the demolition delay bylaw, there are criteria 1, 2, and 3, and then the 4th calls for a determination by the Historical Commission concerning the property's historical or architectural significance by reason of its period, style, method of building and construction, or by reason of its association with a particular architect or builder, or with a person or event of importance to the town's history. Now the reason I'm flagging this is that it's different from 1, 2, and 3, and that 1, 2, and 3 are objective criteria. 4 requires a determination. So, so this could be written, this is why I'm flagging it, it could be written a couple of different ways, and we just followed the model, if you will, of the demo delay bylaw. So it calls for, now we get into a tricky issue of timing here because these are the criteria for determining whether or not a structure is historically significant and therefore eligible to be considered an HSPD property. So there won't have been a board determination. So, and it only needs to meet criteria 1, 2, 3, or 4. So if it meets any of the first 3, it happens. But if somebody has a property but doesn't meet the first 3, they could come to the board in advance, get a finding of significance.
But the only person who is somebody is the town. So why don't we leave the decision on historic significance to the Historical Commission?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That should be the Historic Commission.
What you're just doing is
number 4.
trying to usurp the authority of the Historic Commission into the planning.
Because that's
okay,
exactly what the Historic Commission does.
Exactly. Okay, but
and the only person who can own it is the town. So
I'm doing this in response to the comment last time to take the Historical Commission out.
No,
I know,
and I the whole process out. I thought the commission determination was still going to stay in.
I think it should, if we're going to do this, it should be the Historic.
It was just reiterating the commission's process.
Oh, all right.
I said I made the comment. And I said don't reiterate the process because if they change the process, then we got to change the bylaw.
That's what we meant.
All I mean is leave it with the Historical Commission. If they've decided it is, it is.
It would be sufficient to say.
That's what we said.
All right.
It would be sufficient just to have that first sentence from last time. have been found to be, in quotes, historically significant by the Weston Historical
Pursuant.
Commission, period.
Period.
Because they
Pursuant.
determine
Okay.
these,
Right,
And by the way, the only
Criteria.
deletion applies to these, that's already met by all of them.
exactly.
right. So we really don't need those
All right,
criteria.
so we're just going to keep the
But there
phrase.
might be others down the road. We don't
Right,
know.
but we also ought to, if we leave the town as the owner, if it has to be publicly owned, we ought to let the historical commission determine that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
The planning board
definitely.
doesn't want to determine it, that's not our job anyway.
So if we then go to the top of page 2, the very first line, have been found to be historically significant
Right.
by the Weston Historical Commission. And then
That's all you need.
just, should I say per the process of the demolition delay bylaw, or just?
Doesn't,
Not even.
doesn't seem, yeah,
Period, okay,
they have a process.
okay.
That may change.
Okay.
So that becomes 4, is that what happens?
That just is, it just
Yeah,
is
that's
B,
B.
it's just a one-liner for B,
The 1, 2, 3, 4 all goes away.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep, gotcha.
Okay, wow. That was easy. Okay, then on page 2, you can see some underlining in C. This goes back to, so the way we had it phrased before about
Yeah.
the preservation restriction, and there was just a disagreement here as to process, but, so the consensus of the comments was that the developer have actually historic preservation restriction, and the decision was to time it that they have it before issuance of the building permit. So that's, and you'll see in the third line, and that it had been approved by the historical commission. And, as I mentioned, one can wait a year for that approval, but anyway, that will be something the developer will have to factor in. So
Well,
that's-
I don't know why we're talking about the developer, because I think, and I understand that, the restrictions here are significant enough that I don't think we're gonna have a private developer. No one's gonna follow this. I mean, there's just too much to do and too expensive and too uncertain at the same time, too restrictive and too uncertain for us to ever expect to get a private developer attracted to it. And when we went through a process that had a private developer respond, because, everyone complained that, hey, that was the only response, it was a bad process or whatever, and we're not going to get another bite at the private developers. I mean, I think
Well, actually, that private developer was okay with this.
well, he's okay. It's not clear whether he's okay.
He
as
was
the,
okay with it.
Development advisor. He's okay with the historic preservation restriction.
He was okay with the whole thing. I mean, we never heard any negative comments from that developer about this proposed bylaw, which has been floating around out there since last February.
But why wouldn't the town be the one to get the preservation restrictions since the town owns the buildings?
Well,
Which is what you're saying, I think.
well, as you know, I mean, we've said in the past, and that we thought the preservation restriction may be something that goes, that is considered as part of the redevelopment proposal. And, the historical commission members will say, the preservation restrictions don't preclude additions and changes. They have a process by which they can be considered, and they've defined what are the important elements. So the sort of the two sides are, well, why don't we work out the restriction with the idea? And the historical commission says, well, we can still do a restriction, and we can still work out through an idea and modify the restriction to the extent that that's appropriate for this new idea. And there are examples in the past of historical commission, agreeing to changes to the restriction for changes by the homeowner. We just haven't had it done in this town with a commercial property. So I understand the two sides.
And there are plenty of examples around town where there are historic preservation restrictions in place.
Yes, and they're homeowners, and I understand. That's what I said.
And one of the most obvious is the Coburn barn. That has a restriction on it.
Right, and the house across the street has a restriction.
Well, the two across the street have restrictions.
Right.
And-
No, I agree. I just, that's what I said.
But
It-
look
we
at
have
the
to
Culver
make-
barn, I mean, come on.
That's not a particularly good example, given how long it's taken to get there. I mean, it's,
That's
7 years
that's
of
not because
construction.
of that, but that's, you're changing that subject. It's about how much flexibility you have as a property owner with a preservation restriction. And I would submit that building does not look the same today as it looked
no,
before.
I
before the
absolutely
preservation
acknowledge that,
restriction
Al.
was in place.
I think it can absolutely be done where we put the historic preservation restriction in place in advance. And if the preservation restriction is not so restrictive, and the sense is that there is the flexibility for changes, I think that can be a definition. I don't think it hurts idea creation.
Well, look, with the developer that you mentioned earlier, the commission was there with respect to his proposal on the old library. I mean, we were there.
Oh, I agree, and that was an excellent process.
I think he would say that it was actually better as a result of the negotiation. In fact, he did say that.
I know, and remember though, that's the one that said the preservation restriction wasn't done in advance. It was done during the process, and his design got better because of that process.
No, the guidelines were already there. What we did was persuaded him that living within those guidelines actually helped him. And the same thing would be true with the tavern. You know, we didn't really get a chance to get into that one, but I think we had the same outcome. I do.
Well, as I say, I think there's two different sides. I don't disagree that maybe it just makes more sense to say, here's what we're going to have to live with. Because when we have, I heard the tirade at the beginning from someone who clearly has no idea what this bylaw is doing. Who said, wait for the bylaw, don't hold off the bylaw, wait for the idea. This really allows for any idea to come forward.
Well, which do you want, the chicken or the egg?
Well, no, I mean,
that was the basic question that was posed.
no, it wasn't even that. It was someone who didn't read this and didn't know what he was complaining about. But so I think we have to realize, though, that what is the way in which we negotiate or understand what is the right historic preservation restriction, and then we are going to have to wait 6 to 8 months before we begin a process, because unless you know what the restriction is, you have a hard time understanding how to go forward with your design.
Now, if the guidelines are in place, Again,
But
use the
we
library as the example.
I know, but we also know that there's back and forth with the Mass Historic Commission, and the guidelines aren't the same as the restriction. I mean, aren't necessarily exactly the same.
Yeah, they are. The way these restrictions work, the guidelines define the limits. What you can do, without any review.
But I understand that Mass Historic has some input even to the guidelines that are described in the historic preservation restriction. They don't just say, okay, whatever you say is fine, you rubber stamp it.
I don't know. I've personally written like 3 of these.
And have there been no changes?
What are we arguing about?
Well, I don't know that we are. I mean, I think Michael has a problem with whether his preservation restriction is too restrictive, and I just don't see it.
No, I'm just saying I have a question about the impact of the timing and how restrictive it is. And if you believe it's not restrictive, and we don't have evidence of commercial property, we have good evidence of residential property where it's been flexible. I agree.
I think the stumbling block, and I'm sorry to hog all the conversation, but I think the real stumbling block is not going to be the restriction imposed by by people in Weston.
Oh,
The
yeah.
real stumbling block is going to be historic New England.
Oh, yeah. And that's a dead.
That is a huge hurdle.
I agree.
And so I think we're just,
Yeah,
this is minor stuff compared to that.
In some ways, the library is done, especially if the restriction is a bit more flexible in the interior than what I've seen. Then I think the library is an easy one. and it should be in place, because it kind of helps define the four corners. And I agree with you. Historic New England could be a deal killer in this. They were the last time.
They were, absolutely.
I go around 27, but I guess my concern about the timing on the preservation restriction, thinking about the library, there are proponents of ideas that town entity, Brook School Apartments, is developing an idea.
They're kind of backing off, on the whole 11-unit proposal.
The thing I've heard is a 7-unit, but regardless, I'm not here advocating any particular proposal, but that's my point. They're developing a proposal that we haven't yet seen, but their proposal would entail 7 units. To fit 7 units in the library doesn't maintain the reading room intact as a public space. The preservation restriction, but hear me out. Theoretically, you can do anything. So the preservation restriction, as I've been heard, the interest that I've heard expressed from members of the Historical Commission are to put restrictions on the interior of the building. These are difficult properties. It really concerns me to say we're not going to give the Brook School Apartments even a chance to make their case because we precluded anything that's going to make it viable for them. That I just makes me uncomfortable. So if there's a way to address that, that's fine.
It's a red herring. I really mean that. It's a red herring. I think.
Could you just explain that a little bit when you say red herring?
Because the average size of a unit at Brook School is 775 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Net, not gross. The gross square footage of the library, about a third of which is underground, is 7,000 gross square feet. That includes 14-inch thick exterior walls. Unless you expose the whole basement of the library, you're not going to be able to jack 7 units in that
But
building.
Al, the number is immaterial.
However, is it?
No, yes it is, because
Okay.
if what you're saying is the basement can't be used, then fine, all the more pressure on what can be used, and if we've restricted what we can do in there, then we're just shrinking that usable space even more. We've got difficult buildings to work with. Why do we voluntarily want to, before we have listened to those ideas, preclude them?
Okay, now is this an argument we should be having?
It's with the
Historical
commission,
Commission,
not with the
because
planning
the argument with the planning board is should this proceed or succeed or be concurrent with? And your position with this is it should precede the review process, and that's how it's written. And we've raised some issues.
Well,
about
how it's just drafted here is before the building permit process.
Right, before building permit.
Building permit is issued.
Yeah, but if you're a private developer, you probably, you don't want to spend a lot of money, and you can't get a lender involved until these uncertainties are resolved. So, that's all I'm saying.
We're starting to go round and around, guys.
Yeah, and maybe if we have it done, it will be a year from now, but,
Well, again, it's not you got the
It's
main
okay.
thing is historic on this issue, not the Weston Commission.
And we'll have to talk to the Historical Commission about what their thinking is relative to their preservation restriction. Do you think this language says because there's a historic preservation restriction in place with HNE, it meets this criteria?
Well, it's not, my understanding, and I just learned a little bit about this recently, I think that the preservation restriction that's in place has not been approved by Mass Historic, in which case it does not satisfy this section.
So it has to be,
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that was just an agreement between the town and
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay, so we've flayed that horse to death.
So this language stands then, people are, it's consistent with how people are viewing it?
Yeah,
Well,
no.
No, I don't know.
I thought you guys had an agreement, we get rid of all of the,
no, I understand that, I understand that position on it. I think it's hard to know which is right or wrong. I'm indifferent, actually.
Okay. Well, I think
Well,
that's,
it's
well,
Yes.
taking that is good.
Right.
No, you know what, I just like to see something done that is good for the town and sustainable long-term.
So we don't have crumbling buildings.
And if people say, yeah, let's do that first, that's, we live with it, that's fine.
all right, what's next, Joel?
Okay, well, E is minor, we'll discuss it later, but the, in fact, like in response to a comment you made, that moved to a later part of this, the bylaws, so we can have to get
Can I
there.
just ask a procedural question? Do we want to respond to Ed's questions as we go through this, or do we want to go back through it again?
Ed can raise them along the way. Your call, but I'm happy to raise them.
Well, because you questioned the D, using it as a residence, why that should be in
Oh,
there.
I guess it did. What is the significance of that it hasn't been used as a residence?
Well, because,
That seemed like a red herring to me.
well,
Yeah, and if it has to be publicly owned, who cares?
Yeah.
I follow that. I mean,
But there was a reason we put that in.
well, yeah, the reason was, I think, I agree with you. I think one or the other, but maybe not both, is necessary. The question, the problem with the residential issue is that what we were hearing is that, for example, the guy that lives next door to the library said, "Oh, I'm going to do this. I mean, I'm going to apply for HSPD status myself." And so what this was meant to say is, it's not open season so that everybody can build whatever they want, have all kinds of uses that supersede zoning and apply for an HSPD. But if the requirement is that it's publicly owned, then that forestalls the residential component.
Because I could foresee a potential, and I mean, that the town could say, let's buy that house next door because we think we want to put a art center there. And then we can't do it under HSPD because it has been lived in before we bought it.
Yeah.
So,
And
Another example.
also the Warren Ave Water Department building that we're turning into housing, we decide down the road to repurpose that for another use. It stayed within the town. I mean, it seems to me.
So I would just leave it as be publicly.
Yeah,
I would
and one more
scratch
example that I think is perhaps the most pertinent one is the old train station on the abandoned tracks that someone was living in, and I assume that that's town-owned.
No.
No, it hasn't been ever town owned.
That was, they bought it from them.
Never town owned.
Oh, okay.
But if they were to sell it or not pay their taxes or whatever,
Right.
it could become town-owned. So
Because I could see that
I agree. I think this
becoming.
puts a restriction on it that we don't
Hard to
need.
figure out how it's going to be historic.
If it's town owned, I think it seems to me that's.
So I would
Well,
scratch.
we'll leave that to
Wait,
them.
wait a
Dan
minute.
Fox would come out of the woodwork on that
Yeah.
one. She'd love that one.
But you're just saying something kind of interesting. So the guy next door to the library decides that's what he wants to do, and he's not going to pay taxes on the house, and the town gets to own it. And then,
No home has been, it's going to be foreclosed on because they don't pay taxes.
okay. I just wanted to-
Because it's 1.5% of value,
I wish you'd
and they get
told us
foreclosed on for
first.
2 years.
Okay,
Who would give up their house when 3% of the claim on the value is there? It's not going to happen. It happens because of mortgages, but not because of taxes.
all right.
So,
I don't have to worry
like
about
Weston,
that.
I don't think.
Maybe
I
I'll
don't
change the
think
environment.
Anybody feels that on D, as long as one of the two of them is.
Okay.
But in
So
abandoned land.
so you want to get rid of D, and you just leave it and make
Yeah.
ED,
So I think we're going to get rid of
So
D.
D is
Joe
going-
got that, we're
It's-
scratching
yes,
D.
and E becomes D.
Thanks for remembering that, Steve.
All right, Joe.
But then I'm going to leave it up to you to bring up issues
Okay.
for your memo when it's appropriate.
Okay, the next one is on the same page, next section, permitted uses. If you look at the comment to the right, it flags the 2/3. And so there was a discussion last time about whether the vote at town meeting should be a 2/3 vote. Now, this is to approve the concept plan, whether it needs to be a 2/3 vote or majority vote.
Yeah.
And so that's just an open question.
Yeah.
And you've seen my thoughts on that, but I would add to it that particularly if we're talking, these are town-owned properties, these are very few. This is not taking some huge tract and building them all. Very constrained. What we've seen, and I understand to do Highland Meadows, we went through that process and it was 2/3. I think when they're not town-owned properties, you don't get the same level of town-wide passions around different.
You weren't there for the
Highland
Meadows
I
hearings.
was there for
Holy
some
cow.
of that. I was there for some of that,
Wow.
and there were passions, but you know, town-owned properties, people have very specific ideas, and
Yeah, they own it.
and they own it.
In their
It's
heads.
fundamentally different from privately owned land, and what that, I mean, I can understand people would say, yes, so we should make the hurdle even higher for public property, but I would say what we're doing is we are making it enormously difficult to preserve these buildings that people care about, because people are coming from so many different directions. And I think we actually do a disservice to the buildings and to the interest of the town by making that hurdle be 2/3. And I think the 2/3 requirement that's in place for most zoning bylaws is absolutely right. When we change the rule by which we play, we want to make sure there's a very large majority of the town in favor of it. These are really fundamentally different from that. And I think in the interest of the town, I hear from so many people that I don't care if it's an art center, I don't care if it's apartments, we need it to be something, and let's get on with it. And they're frustrated by this process. And I'm not saying that means we should rush it, but I think it's going to be very difficult if all it takes is 1/3 plus 1 to stop any process.
Because there's a lot of factors.
I'm totally in agreement with you.
Yeah,
Totally.
I am too, yeah. Just
Yeah. I mean,
kind of reminds me of the Italian government.
This
you
is
know?
for the
So
public
many
good.
factions, they can't get anything together.
you know, now, I think that if I read the last meeting, I mean, people were looking at what the town was doing for a private business. And that adds a different flavor to it, which may jump into what you're saying. But I agree, simple majority is what should be in this at this point.
Yeah, and remember, if it's town doing it for a private entity, we also have the vote on the CPA allocation, which, well, could be a 2/3 vote if it required borrowings. We have a fair amount of cash there. It might not need a 2/3 vote. So we have a couple other votes involved in this, so I'm highly supportive of that. I also see how I think our June meeting was kind of gamed a little bit because of the 2/3, and I think we'd rather hear it.
How long do you think it's going to be before people stop speculating about whether the zoning bylaw should have come first or not?
Didn't matter. What if it?
It's a rhetorical question. Rhetorical questions, who needs them?
So we're going to change that?
So,
So, majority.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
We're batting 1,000 now.
what about just in the next paragraph, the commonly occupying? I mean, I think we're okay with it. Bill Sandals raised a question. You asked him to do a definition.
Yeah.
That would be clear.
But Bill's been out of commission.
Um,
So
Does everyone think that's clear enough?
I think we're talking about so few possibilities that I don't think it's actually going to be an issue. You know, it's not as though we have dozens of potential sites, you know. Every other site I can think of is not going to be major outside of whatever a large use of the tavern would be. So I'm not sure that defining the trigger between major and minor projects is a big deal. Do other people feel that way?
Well, there were at least a couple questions on it at town meeting last June 17th.
It had to do with the maximum population.
Numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
Which isn't
that what you're saying? I'm sorry, I thought you were saying total occupancy of 30 or greater. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, that was for, yeah.
Well, I was just talking about the word commonly occupying, but
it
can move on.
But it ties into the 30, right?
Yes.
So I'm just saying, I think there was awareness of that at town meeting by other than Bill Sandals. I think part of it is that we have
the trigger.
Well, the part of it was that they didn't know what would happen if it was more than that. So now you're in one category or the other. It's clear that you have to do something, and now it's just an issue. Before, the question was, well, what if we don't know what we have to do if we have more than 30, so that definition becomes
right. So I would say if there's more than 30 people commonly occupying the structure, then it has to have a concept plan to get approved. But now we only need a majority vote to do it. So,
I think it's an okay level. I would argue though that if it were a meeting room, the common occupancy has to be the capacity for a meeting room. And you would say no.
Building inspector.
Yeah, isn't that what we said?
The building inspector will determine the common occupancy.
Okay.
The max.
Yeah. What happened to Joel? He evaporated.
I'm sure he'll be back.
We took out the sizes last time. The number of dwelling units, the number of seats, and so forth.
And we changed the eating place definition to.
Yep. And we're replacing the word corporation with organization or entity. That was a question last time.
Oh, yeah, we said organization rather than corporation.
Okay.
And by the way, the no more than 4 units, we also talked about the no more than 4 guests for the bed and breakfast, or are we leaving that one?
That was the one thing. We didn't have notes. We had residents and then the seats. The bed and breakfast, if that was to be included, I didn't have that in notes.
Yeah.
Joel didn't either.
We didn't talk about that. Actually, I sort of like keeping that limit in there because what you don't want is a motel.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
Okay. Just want to I agree with that.
Wouldn't it be reasonable that people staying overnight could have 2 people join them for breakfast?
But it's 4 guest suites.
It's 4 guest suites.
It's not the number of people eating. It's the number of rooms.
No breakfast shall be served to members of the public not lodged as overnight guests.
Oh, I see. Or as guests of guests. Most of those places just don't do that. They aren't set up to do it.
You have to draw a line there. This isn't a restaurant.
Right.
Every bed and breakfast I've ever stayed at.
There are.
You can't walk in and order.
They have their dining.
Well, wait, unless it's number 8, which it is a restaurant.
Right. But the B&B isn't a restaurant.
Right.
It's a B&B.
So Joel, number 9, we were going
Thank
to
you.
change corporation to organization.
Oh, okay.
Were you here when we decided to go with simple majority?
Yes, I heard that.
Okay.
So on paragraph 4, we don't have a change here, but one of the comments I'd asked, and really small thing, but the end of paragraph, the first paragraph of item 4, it says, is there a reason why we can't just say with site approval issued by the planning board, period, and lose the rest of that? Because it then is just saying the same thing for major projects and for minor projects.
So again, Ed, what's that?
So in the very last sentence, the second to last line, it says, revised special permit with site plan approval issued by the planning board, period. We're saying that the process is exactly the same for major projects, and then we go on to say, and revised special.
No, it's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
It's not the same at all.
It's a majority vote and approval by the planning board for major projects and site plan approval, maybe only, or.
I see, okay, yep, I get you, yep, okay.
So even revisions take a new town meeting vote.
Yep.
Like
So-
just-
That's all one long sentence.
So that should be a separate
Not
sentence.
quite so breathtakingly different.
Because you want to separate the revised special permit.
Right, can't
You want to
period.
separate the minor project
And the major
to
project.
clarify it, that's why.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's why.
One of the
it was
problems-
That would address
confusing.
that.
It's just run on,
Well, lawyers are paid more for commas than for periods.
oh, is that why?
This was drafted by an architect.
So,
So long as
Architects are compensated on an entirely different set of projects.
architects are not compensated.
so if you put a period and you start with for minor projects, for minor projects, revised special permit and site plan
Yeah.
approval will be issued.
Yeah, that would,
Yeah,
that
that
would
makes it clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, moving on.
I'm sorry, just because I'll catch it.
I would put a period after major projects,
Yeah.
and I would start with for minor projects,
Yeah.
comma, revised special permit with site plan approval issued by the planning board.
Which is not a sentence, but
Right. Shall be required, yeah.
Yes.
At the top of page 4, there was some question about municipal impact analysis and what that meant, it's public safety, traffic, and all that.
Yeah, no, I thought we went through that.
Do we have to define it, or?
No.
So
It's
we're
actually,
okay with it?
yeah, anybody preparing the proposal or an application would understand what that means.
Okay.
I think. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I mean, I understand, but maybe if I say what I understand it to mean and you say, yes, that's what you understand, we'll have at least two concurrences, or a concurrence. I think municipal impact analysis is typically what are the taxes paid and what are the incremental services required by the town, so that we understand whether this is a drain on resources from other members of the other occupants of the town to pay for these added services.
Right. That's what it is. That's my understanding.
I think what you'll find is that there's not much, not many further comments. We'll get to page 7.
Where are we now?
Well, the next comment that was raised last time is on page 7, and this is where the language was moved. So if you go back to page 6, at the bottom of page 6, paragraph 4, is the beginning of a section talking about the development agreement. And so, top of page 7, excuse me, the language that's in there about the development agreement was moved from earlier on, the concept plan language. And in addition, what had been referred to earlier as a right of first refusal there was agreement last time that be changed to a right of first offer.
Could I make a comment? And I would encourage us to consider that the development agreement may also require,
I agree with that.
because
Yeah.
there's some circumstances where we just don't want it, and I think,
Yeah.
and then, and I really do think we have to say right of first offer if we,
Chapter 61A does say right of first refusal for farmland.
Right.
right. But remember, it has gone through 10 years, I mean, they have to pay
Yes.
10 years of taxes too,
Yeah.
to take it out. And that's been, that's sort of what you knew when you voluntarily put it in here.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just, I think this will probably be moot because, or it may be moot, but I can see a situation in which a 501 or a nonprofit organization decides to operate an art gallery in the reading room, and the town in that situation would say, and maybe the town sells it to them as part of the condominium developed there, the town may say, as we frankly we're going to do with the Women's Community League and the Weston Historical Society, town has the right to buy it back for $1, and and maybe if they're going to pay for it, there's a different thing, but I think a may is appropriate.
Yeah. I mean,
And there can be arguments made that, hey, we don't need to do it, or it's impossible to execute this with the shall, But again, offer to me is, if you offer it, if the town decides we don't want it, then the person is free to go and market it to others, as opposed
What
to.
does a right of first offer mean?
Means that if you want to sell, if you've decided
Yeah,
that you want to sell, you have to offer it to me first.
okay.
And if I decide to decline the offer, and typically it says it's got to be at the fair market value, and there may be some arguments about fair market value, but if I say, look, we'll take it to town meeting turns it down, now you're free to go and put it on the market. If it's right of first refusal, you have to put it on the market, receive an offer, and then it goes to town meeting for town meeting to decide if we want to buy it. And you talk to a broker and say, if a town has a right of first refusal, are you going to spend your time trying to sell this? And they go, no, because I just generate the offer, then the town buys it. I don't get my commission if the town buys it. And if the town turns it down, I've already lost the buyer. It's a chill on the ability to market it. Now, I don't feel sorry for people with Chapter 61 land because they received a huge tax benefit, and they knew voluntarily what they were going into. I mean, this one, I guess you could say, well, they know.
But the town, there are going to be circumstances where the town's going to want this facility back.
Right, and that's why you have to offer it to us.
But there, let's just spin it out for a minute.
Yeah.
If it's first offer, the guy has to offer it to the town. But what if the town's offer is not what the guy's looking for?
Well, generally you have to put in some language about fair market value, because remember, we will have an assessment, we will have indication of value. I mean, that's first offer generally. Language on first offer generally says you can't ask for $1 billion and then resell it for $1 million. I mean, it has to be a legitimate fair market value offer.
Do we have a definition in our town codes, or do
No.
we need it here?
No,
No, but there's standard language that says that.
Right, and the important point that Michael made is that there is a negotiation involved, and it's around fine points, not 50%, but 5 to 10%. But if the town ultimately offers $2 million, it's turned down, and then the owner sells it for $1.5 million, the town obviously has a right at that point
Don't have
to
recourse.
match
That's what
it.
you're
Yeah,
saying.
no, I mean, it was that big deal.
Okay.
So, on the last sentence on that paragraph, such development agreement may be conditional upon town meeting approval of a concept plan. I mean, it sounds to me like you're talking about a repurchase.
No.
And don't you mean that that it's to
I think,
execute the development agreement?
I think what it means is that if town meeting doesn't approve the concept plan, then the property is not saddled with the development agreement. I mean, in this case, given that the town's an owner, it's not as big an issue, but we do this a lot when we have a private owner who's entered into a development agreement, and so there will be a private player in here, and they agree to a development agreement, and everybody, what happens is you sign the development agreement before town meeting, so we can represent the town meeting that we've got executed development agreements. But if town meeting votes it down, then the developer and the property owner has the ability to get rid of the development agreement, because why should the owner be saddled with the development agreement if they didn't get the town meeting vote?
Yeah, and this is only going to be applicable to future changes, because it's the town dealing with the town, so it can't, town can't sign a development agreement with itself.
Right.
It's not a contract.
Right,
So
what
it'll
if
only
the town,
be something down the line.
so what if the town does continue to own them? Do we have to change any of this language, or,
No.
because then there's no development agreement?
Right. I mean, it anticipates that a private third party comes in at some point, but if one
But that may
doesn't.
not happen.
That's right, and if one doesn't.
No, but it could happen 40 years from now.
Yeah.
Well,
Are you saying that,
as long as it doesn't preclude the town from owning it now.
oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, it
so-
definitely
that's-
doesn't.
Okay. Also, at the end of the first sentence, there was some question after review and approval by the planning board. We really meant that.
That's,
I think Michael raised that as a question.
Would the planning board be reviewing the development agreement?
I
rather than
raised
the
that
Board
as a
of
question.
Selectmen?
I did too.
Oh, yeah, because, that's right, because you have memories of, I think, of Highland Meadows.
No, you brought up Highland Meadows. It basically said we both signed it, both entities signed it.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that.
Yeah.
I sort of think it's nice to see a separation, but your point was that it worked in the past. Why don't we have it work again?
There's no reason why
I'm not. I would prefer to see a separation, and then people can say, look, they're two separate elected bodies that worked on this, as opposed to this puts the planning board essentially in control, because if you don't agree to it, then we don't have a development agreement. Although we also don't have a development if the Board of Selectmen don't agree to it, so.
I mean, this is about cooperation. It really is.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
has to be.
yeah.
I know.
But sooner or later,
I
You
do
gotta
like a
trust each other.
separation that says.
I know that's a hard pill to swallow. But
No, it isn't. It's just that because it worked very well, you're right, it worked perfectly at our
like almost like clockwork.
Almost, yeah. But I would say that, in general, you'd say the Board of Selectmen is looking out for the financial and physical responsibilities of the town, and the planning board is physical condition, physical versus physical, and so this is mainly a fiscal issue, although because all aspects of the development agreement that would relate to the physical things are already included in your review. So I would have said,
No, but we
keep
did
them separate.
a lot of back and forth with the Highland Meadows attorney on that development agreement, and what they were and weren't required to do down the road.
Related to the physical
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of negotiation on that. Sue, do you remember that? No, I mean, it's not as clean cut as it sounds.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I see your point.
So that's staying as is.
Yes.
I'm grudgingly acknowledging you have a reasonable point.
Are we going to add at fair market value after
Is there
first
payback?
right of offer?
It happens frequently.
Yeah.
If it,
Just here that he accepted it.
if it goes into the agreement, it would be spelled out a little more. I mean, I don't think we need to do that. get to that level of detail.
Okay.
Can we, sorry, we skipped over a couple of things under paragraph 5 concept plan that I wanted to bring up. One really trivial, small thing, but it talks about wind orientation in the very last words of 5A1 on page 4. And it's at the bottom of 5A1.
And sign was going back.
Proposed new construction shall take advantage of solar and wind orientation. Are we thinking we're going to put windmills on these sites?
No.
Solar.
What, I mean, solar, but what do we?
Well, I think you've covered it when you said green,
Right.
Yeah.
building standards and stuff, because
So it just
the
does not
driver
really
is
also-
going to be whether it fits with the existing buildings, and it's such a small addition anyway.
it was very small, but I just was puzzled about what we're looking to achieve there.
The hope, by the way,
It's
is
not
that
about wind
solar
power.
gets smaller and smaller, and solar collectors get smaller and smaller.
Right.
They incorporated into Windows.
Right. So solar, I'm fine.
We're
with
talking
that.
about
It's
passive
green.
solar here,
Right.
probably,
Right.
and
We're
passive
talking
wind.
about.
Just how you orient the building
Exactly.
relative to the sun and the prevailing breeze.
Right.
We're not talking about
Yeah,
energy.
wind orientation.
Then you
could
know
be,
it ought to
uh,
spell, it
Okay.
should be
could
spelled
be
out that
just
that's
using the
passive.
breeze to help
Sure.
ventilate.
It should be spelled out,
Okay.
because I would get it as like we get big solar collectors and a couple small windmills.
Should we say
So if
something?
it's going to be passive, it should be in there.
And, okay, never mind. I'm fine.
That's
with-
all
I'm-
included in the green
I'm-
principle.
I'm-
Yeah.
It is, but I'm fine with it. I'm not trying to stir it.
Is the last sentence being deleted, or
I think we're leaving it.
leaving it?
Yeah.
So under 5A,
No, but back to, but we're going to add passive, or we're just going to let it go and let the future 40 years from now determine what we meant?
Yeah.
You know.
yeah.
I gotta give them something
All right.
to do.
Okay, so on page 5, towards the bottom where it says paragraph 2, new construction, the very end, it prohibits freestanding vehicle garages. Why do we want to prohibit that in the bylaw and not leave it as an option? Why not leave it on the table? I realize you can waive provisions of the bylaw, but why have it be in there if we might want to waive it? And if we don't want to waive it, we just don't allow them to build a garage, us or whatever to build a garage.
Because it raises a number of, it could get to be a negotiating problem. It depends on what the uses are. But, for example, if we're talking about the old library, as a practical matter, where are you going to put a garage?
Well,
But if
Well, some
garages,
people in town would say, why not build a garage over the parking lot that's there?
well, I don't think that's a job idea.
Well, that's your opinion, and it's a valid opinion. Not everybody shares that opinion. Why? I'm not sure why we need to codify that in the bylaw. Why not deal with that in the approval process?
Well, site plan approval.
Yeah, I mean, that's what site plan approval's for.
It's not site plan approval, it's a special permit process.
Or special permit process.
It's a very big
Wouldn't we have a
difference.
bite at that apple in the special permit process?
Yeah, absolutely.
You would, but it's,
I just think there are situations where I actually want a covered garage because I don't want to see the cars sitting outside.
like what?
What's
Let's look at what's actually there. Do you want to see a garage next to the tavern?
No, but it could be built on Route 20.
what's in the back of my
Wet.
mind
Wet.
is
It's not all wet.
There's a little knoll there.
the house that the Weston Affordable Housing Foundation built over on Pine Street. Many of the neighbors were adamant that there needed to be a garage there because they didn't want to see all the cars parked out in the driveway. That was significant to the neighbors in supporting the proposal. So if that can happen, why do we want to say it can't happen? Let's look at it on the merits
And especially as this may be applied to other buildings. Now I think of it. I mean, this is a floating development, so it's applicable to, it could be to something at
the Fisk Law Office.
well,
That
those
was
are-
there?
Yeah, those won't happen, but let's say something happened at, Case Estates, I don't know. I could see it happening somewhere in the future. You handle
What
it
do you
with
guys think?
I'm I'm just trying to envision where and how a garage would be.
No, but you're-
would be
but you're-
integrated
no,
into
no,
the
no,
Don't
library.
get locked in on
Don't get
Right.
locked in on those
side.
three buildings, because this is applicable to any publicly owned building anywhere in Weston.
Well, how do we prevent it from happening?
Right, how do we keep it?
Regardless of what can
Well,
happen.
through the
The special
special
permit,
permit,
just site
except,
plan.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can say, I mean, it has to be a historic building and things have to be compatible. And so you could say, hey, that is a compatible garage. I could see building a barn somewhere that becomes the garage. I mean, I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm just trying to think how this goes when we're doing that. You guys haven't been there when we're doing the negotiations.
It all sounds so
No one
simple.
And it all sounds so simple, right, but
You're
unless
sitting
it's
there and,
spelled
oh, it's
out.
gonna be lovely.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
No,
unless
next
it's
thing you know,
spelled
it's a
out, it's
huge fight.
really, really hard, because we can have an incredible
This is
battle.
not falling on a sword
Okay.
kind of deal.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
no, it's not. It just seemed like we were.
I mean, we could have put it in a line thing, in the case of the library, no,
Can we
No,
say
you
are
can't do
allowed
that.
to be prohibited?
No, you
Yeah.
can't do that.
Sidewalk.
no, okay.
You can't.
So,
Because that's spot zoning then.
Yeah.
You can't
well,
do
and
that.
then once again, it's way to transmit to the board 45 years down, well, maybe it's immaterial. Maybe it's overcome by events, there may be no library by then. Maybe-
And we may not need garages because
Correct.
people may be teleported. Who knows?
And nobody may be driving,
but
we'll have to Google
But
comments.
it just strikes me that out of all the potential outbuildings, this one,
Yeah.
we're saying you can't do those. Anything else goes, but this one you can't. It seems curious to me,
Well,
but
and interesting, because you had already had the experience over,
where the abutters wanted
really
a
wanted
garage.
one. Of course, it is different, this is a residential.
But going back
area.
to, but, yes, but, the water department building that we're redeveloping, that's gonna get a garage.
Yeah.
If that
What do you mean
became,
it's gonna get a garage?
I mean, that, as a residential development, that may well have garages as part of it.
No, I mean, we reviewed all those buildings. There are gonna be no new garage structures. Part of the waterworks building is gonna be converted into a garage.
Yeah.
But it's not gonna be a new garage sitting out there on the site.
I understand, but it's a town municipal building, it's being repurposed, and I mean, I think it's important not to get hung up on it.
Yeah, this is not
Okay.
worth fighting over.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, it seems unnecessary, but whatever, I'll go for that.
I agree with you, but it's not.
And then, I was slightly concerned about the 20% of RDFA in the next paragraph, but
Where are you now?
on the bottom of page 5, new construction.
Right here, move back.
No,
It's our
move
page
backwards.
6.
Oh, I was gonna say, because I'm kind
We
of
went
finding.
backwards. Yeah, you were concerned about the 20% limit
Yeah,
on the additions.
and it just struck me as,
Well, especially since the Urbanica proposal, which I agree it had too big an addition, but that addition was significantly more than 20% of the RGFA.
Yeah, it was. I
So,
know.
And
It was humongous.
it was. It doesn't make sense. I don't think, if we think it's an excess building to the town, that we're going to then finance the construction of a 5,000 square foot addition. But
That was one of the stumbling blocks in that whole
Right.
proposal.
Yeah.
Big one.
yeah, it was.
we didn't get to that. But yeah,
Yeah, we did. A lot of people got to that one. There was
Yeah.
a lot of problem with that.
So I was just suggesting 25% as a, even, partially just for perception, that
So you're saying 25?
25 rather than 20.
Yeah, let's
It
do
just,
25.
I think the perception is that's more, again, it's not a hill to die on.
We can live with 25.
Yeah, I think 25 makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. You okay with that, Sue?
Yes.
That's it, and I've got to say, I don't sit in on all of the meetings, I've sat in through the years, and Al, you kind of touched on this, I'm aware that you serve the entire town, but the people that tend to be sitting in front of you at these meetings are a self-selected group, and thanks for doing what you do.
Thanks, Nick.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate hearing
But
it.
I don't think we've gotten to the end of this review, have we?
Let's see, well,
I'm sorry.
That's ready for debate, yes.
It's the end of your review.
What inning is it?
Yeah.
We've got another hour or two, so.
Yeah.
You want to know the score?
Yeah, what's the score?
It's Red Sox 6,
6-0.
Cardinals 0
wow.
in the 5th inning.
Oh, there's still time.
What about those people who have tickets to the game 7?
Well, they'd be disappointed.
They get refunds.
They can frame them.
Oh, I know, but they want to see, anyway, go ahead. So where are we on this?
Well, still on page 7, you see there's a comment 8. It's just, you agreed to change that 2/3 to majority, so it's going to happen here as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see.
That was it for comments that we had.
So, yeah.
Did you have any others? This time?
Okay. Then it sounds as though we can actually do this one.
This is ready for prime time, is what we're saying?
Wow.
I'm afraid Mr. Schur is going to think we've lost our minds.
But he hasn't read this. He couldn't have read it.
Oh, Richard Shear, I don't know. What he was proposing actually would work under this amendment. When he was, that whole media thing that he was proposing would work here.
And I think the other thing we know is that the only way you can evaluate an idea is how it fits with some of the things that the consensus of people say are important core elements, and this presumably says, okay, these are historic buildings, so you have to meet that requirement. So it does eliminate some ideas, perhaps, but it establishes those things that the framework for us to evaluate ideas. And it gives immense flexibility.
So the town is handling the stuff with the old waterworks building, project management, hiring contractors, building, design. Why isn't the town doing that with the old library? As opposed to looking for...
Because that's
Wait, why are you going on that?
Yeah.
We did. Al served on the committee. That's exactly what we're going to do, and the town turned it down. The town turned it down. We said, the town said, why are we spending $8 million? Let's get a private developer in here and spend less.
I think you were just talking about the exterior, restoring the exterior that the town did approve.
We are doing it.
And then we said, okay, we heard you. We'll do an RFP. I mean, and we'll see if others come up with ideas. This is, people forget the history. I mean, we did it. Spent 4 years evaluating, 5 years evaluating ideas. Hired architects, worked through a plan. Worked through the, 4 different town meeting approvals. The liquor license that also had a ballot approval, also had state legislative approval, governor approval. All those things were all related to the town being the developer. And then people said, no, we don't want you to do that. The
It was the
town is
restaurant
bad.
that killed it. It was the size of the restaurant that killed it.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was with the tavern part and stuff.
No, but it killed the whole thing.
No, and you know what? We've learned from that process. We've learned from this process. And there's a lot of emotion, a lot of attachment, a lot of difference of opinion. We learn a little bit each way, each step, and I think we're going to get a better result, ultimately. I think it may, I'm hoping it might happen in the next go-round. And it may be the town. But what I think is the troubling one is that people say, I have the idea, now you go and do it. As opposed to, here's how we assemble the resources to get an idea into a plan and into an execution group. They all want someone else to do it.
Yeah, well, part of the thing
So
that
do
was
I.
so sad about
Oh, I know.
that first go-around was the deadening
For
effect
12 years.
of that defeat after 4 years of really hard work with a lot of really wonderful people that will probably never volunteer.
Right,
public
exactly.
service.
And
And
I
so now
think-
everybody else comes up and says, I have a great idea, why don't you run with it for me? And it's like,
Yeah, well, and I think that equal impact is on the development community that says, hey, someone came up with an idea, all the capabilities and an idea, flawed as it may have been.
yeah.
They tried to be responsive to our RFPs,
Right.
and now, they get in a quagmire, spend $100,000, got in a quagmire, and other people say, it's not worth the effort.
Right.
So I think, to answer your question, we'll probably have to do a couple, or some hybrid.
We'll see, guys. You
Yeah.
wanna stick around for the definitions?
No, I'll let Webster do that.
So, I want clarification because for the other item, we continued it to 7:45 on the 5th. For here, we should specify whether or not we're closing it or we're just continuing
I think we
it.
close this one.
Okay,
I don't see a room full of people that are,
okay, so we should then,
You need a motion.
yeah.
Uh,
Night.
Yeah, motion to close the public hearing on the 2013 Fall Town Meeting zoning article hearing regarding the HSPD.
Which is?
Article A, actually,
Historic.
is how it's designated this morning.
The Article A, Historic Structures Preservation Development Bylaw.
so on the 5th, I'll, make
Wait a
sure-
minute, I
Yeah.
think we got a.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So on the 5th, I'll have the final language so we can just verify it conforms to the board's intent so that we can submit it for the board selection for their meeting on the 6th.
Right.
I think you'll vote a recommendation at that time. I mean, it goes without saying, but you might as well vote it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.